Hello everybody, welcome to Also Rusty Bucket. Subscribe to the channel if you haven't done already and drop a like on this video. I'm trying to hit 100k subscribers on the channel by the end of the year, so your subscription would be much appreciated. Also drop a like on this video, it only takes 1 second and makes a massive difference. And new My NBA episode 12 going over the offseason is out now if you have not checked that out already, and also check out the series. So, first game of the day that I'm reacting to is the Hornets versus the Brooklyn Nets game. And the title of this video is something along the lines of "There is something wrong with the Nets." I kind of have to put this preface on literally everything that I say in these videos, especially early on in the season, but it's such a small sample size that you shouldn't read into things all that much. That being said, the next week's worth of videos that I planned for my main channel does kind of read into some early season stuff a little bit, but whatever. Regardless, the Nets in this game, 95 points, and then we saw in the opener versus the Milwaukee Bucks, their offense also looked a little bit rough as they scored 104 points. Now, doing so against the Milwaukee Bucks defense, I'd say is acceptable. To not score a lot of points against one of the best defensive teams in the league, even though Drew Holiday only played like 10 minutes in that game, I think. It makes a little bit of sense. And then they played this game versus the Sixers, which ended up being a really good game, and I wish I had caught it. But even then, 114 points is not... it's an average performance from the Nets. But then come today's game, and versus the Hornets, who are not a particularly great offensive team, they scored just 95 points. Now, it's worth mentioning the league average offensive rating is lower right now than it has been in the past couple of seasons. So the Nets scoring being down a little bit makes some sense. But 95 points from a team that has Kevin Durant and James Harden on it feels pretty low to me. And really the main culprit is James Harden. Because if you look at this game and you look at the game so far, James Harden is averaging 18 points per game as well as 8 assists so far over 3 regular season games. That's not a lot. A part of that is the fact that he's not shooting a lot of free throws, but I feel like a lot of people have declared that, like, oh yeah, it's the free throw thing. But James Harden, when he was with the Nets last year, also reduced the amount of free throw attempts he was getting, not even from a lack of foul baiting. He just wasn't really doing it all that much. But I feel as though he's been a little bit too passive and treating the Nets as though he did when Kyrie was playing, when now that it's just him and Kevin Durant, he really needs to ramp up his aggressiveness and view himself as someone who should be shooting the ball more than 16 times a game, and especially someone who should be making more than 6 of those shots. Kevin Durant, on the flip side, averaging 33 points per game after this game. He had 38 in this one on 70% shooting. So Kevin Durant has been fine. The rest of the Nets have not. James Harden has not been good. Joe Harris hasn't been great, and the Sixers game, they relied on LaMarcus Aldridge for a lot of their offense. And this one, LaMarcus did a little bit too. He had 9 points in 22 minutes, which is not bad. But yeah, offensively, the Nets just don't look great, which being that their offense is like everything with them, even though their defense and their depth and all that is better than people give it credit for, it's still not great. Offense and scoring the ball is supposed to be their thing. The fact that that has looked rough through 3 games is definitely not an encouraging sign. And as a result of this, they are down. They have a 1-2 record now. So not the greatest start in the season with the Brooklyn Nets. Having Kyrie back would kind of solve all of these problems, but of course he's not back yet, and you just gotta have to deal with those consequences. So that's rough. I'm not gonna read into it too much because, as I mentioned, just a 3-game sample size, but there's stuff here to be concerned about, I would say. On the Charlotte Hornets end of things, though, is where I believe things get interesting. I don't know if I said this or not. It's kind of obvious. The only game I'm reacting to is this one because it's the only one that's happened. The only game that was early on a Sunday, which I didn't necessarily appreciate, but whatever. The Hornets played a fantastic game, and probably one of their better games of the season. This is the first game that I have seen from them in the season, to be fair. But Miles Bridges, in his first 2 games, averaged 21 points per game. This game, he has 32 points, and he had 21 at halftime. He finishes with 32 and 9 rebounds on 9 for 16 from the field, and he got to the free throw line 12 times and hit 11 of those. Getting 12 free throw attempts this season, this is something I'm going to talk about in the video on my main channel on Monday. Stay tuned for that, but it's talking about the differences in officiating in the league this season thus far. To get 12 free throw attempts is a lot. He was just going to the basket relentlessly. There were stretches where he was getting a lot of easy shots in the paint. Also, I should say for Brooklyn, Obviously, we're not expecting a whole lot of defense from them, but there were a lot of possessions in this game where the Hornets just got a way too easy lane to the basket, and that was part of the reason why Bridges went off. He hit a step-back three. He hit a big three in the fourth quarter. He just had his fingerprints all over this game. Defensively, he made a couple of big defensive plays. One block in particular that stands out. He got a steal late in the fourth quarter that kind of was the start of the run that put Brooklyn down. But now with this 32-point performance through 3 games, Miles Bridges averages 25 points per game. Now, I picked Miles to be my breakout player of the Hornets. I'm pretty sure there's a chance I did a hybrid between it being him or PJ Washington, but I'm pretty sure I said Miles. And that's because last year there was like a 30-game stretch to close the year where there were a lot of players injured, Gordon Hayward and LaMelo Ball, and the Hornets were looking for somebody to step up offensively and be a source of offense for them. And as it turned out, it ended up being Miles Bridges. And now, once again, as the year has started, he has had some more opportunity. Terry Rozier has not been playing, and that has given him more shots. Gordon Hayward has taken a little bit of a backseat. And, yeah, just overall, it looks like they're looking to him a little bit more. And I think Bridges will probably end up being the starting power forward for the rest of the season. Hayward at the 2, Plumlee at center, LaMelo at point, and then Terry Rozier at the shooting guard spot. But it's interesting because the forwards off of the bench for this Hornets team is PJ Washington and Kelly Oubre Jr. Feel like you're getting a little bit in deep there, on top of the fact that you want to give Jalen McDaniels some opportunity because he was really good in this game and has shown flashes in the past. Also, James Bouknight you want to hopefully have crack the rotation. But yeah, this overall a great situation to have Miles be this good, but I believe he's up for a contract extension if I'm not mistaken. Let me actually fact check that just to be sure that he is indeed not under contract going into this offseason, because if that is the case, you have to worry about paying him, and that is a little bit of an ordeal, because if he ends up being a 20-point per game scorer as young as he is, with him also being one of the better defensive players one of the better perimeter defensive players in the league. I want to say better defensive players overall. Where the fuck is his contract? Okay, there it is. Yeah, his contract's over after this season. There's going to be a market for him. There's going to be some teams that want to give him money. Teams like the OKC Thunder, for example. Like, they will give Miles a borderline max level contract. So that's an interesting situation coming up for the Hornets. But if he continues to score like this while being the defender that he is, the rebounder that he is, Miles is gonna get a bag. Outside of that, what ended up killing them, the Nets, really more in the fourth quarter, was not so much Miles or Gordon Hayward or LaMelo. LaMelo actually didn't play, I think, at all, or at least definitely to close the fourth quarter, because of this guy. And that guy was Ish Smith, who scored 15 points in this game, as well as got 4 assists, and I believe he did almost all of that scoring, if not all of it, in the fourth quarter. Mid-range shots, pull-up mid-range shots, pull-up three-pointer, a couple of really nice drives, one really nice pass out of a jump shot to Kelly Oubre under the rim on Joe Harris for a layup. A lot of fantastic plays from Ish Smith. He is, I've said for a long time, Ish Smith has been my go-to, like, hey, Ish Smith, pretty fucking good. Can we stop giving him minimum contracts, and can teams stop just like giving him 10 minutes a game? Because Ish Smith is good every time he plays. And in this game, he puts the Brooklyn Nets away. That's not nothing. His playmaking is great. His scoring is good to sometimes surprisingly good. And then his defense is not bad. And his three ball is whatever, but like for a backup point guard, a guy who's going to be a good playmaker, a decent enough shooter, and a guy who can score a decent amount, being one of the faster players in the league, Ish Smith is underrated, and I believe he's on basically a minimum contract for the Hornets. So as a backup point guard, that's an absolute fucking steal. Another thing that's worth mentioning is Cody Martin, who hit 2 pull-up three-pointers in the fourth quarter of this game. Cody is not a particularly good three-point shooter, if I'm not confusing him with his brother. I'm pretty sure they're both not good shooters. But 2 pull-up three-pointers. So They were a little bit more open than they probably should have been, but there was a little bit of like a wow, everything is dropping for the Hornets, because like Ish Smith hit a pull-up mid-range shot over Kevin Durant and his length, and it was like, wow, that went in. Like there was a lot of crazy shots going in for the Hornets. And then on the net side of things, it was kind of the Kevin Durant one-man show with the mid-range fadeaways. He had a lot of mid-range shots in this game, effortlessly, as he's one to do. But for the Hornets, they had a lot of guys doing things, and then for the Nets, it was just Kevin Durant, and no one else brought anything to the table. James Harden's the only other player that scored in double digits, and he only scored 15. So yeah, the Nets are not looking great, and Miles Bridges looks like he's going to be an early most improved player candidate, and a guy who could potentially be getting a max contract this offseason with how young he is and how good he might end up being. So yeah, breakout year for Miles Bridges. The Nets have some things to figure out, and that is it. Goodbye.